Hello, Web Summit. How's everybody today? How's everybody today? I came all the way from Brooklyn, New York. I'm here today to talk to you about post-purpose. What happens when brands go beyond purpose and discover the power of obsession. You know, purpose has been performed on the part of companies. I want to take that down a little bit and talk about what should be behind it. But just by way of introduction, I'm the CEO and founder of a company called SYLVAIN. We're based in New York. We do strategy and design. These are some companies we've worked with recently. We really help them think about the future of their products, their brands, how they come to life. But enough about me. I want to ask you a very simple question, okay? Who here can state the purpose of the company you work for? Just by way of hands. Who here can raise your hand if you can state why your company is in business? Okay, that's a fair amount. It turns out only 7% of CEOs can actually state the reason their company was in business. Now, there's actually a lack of understanding of why companies actually do the work that they do. The most successful companies actually serve a societal purpose that goes beyond making profit. The most successful companies align themselves with the zeitgeist of the time to really explore and take advantage of the moment that we're in. And I'll go through a few examples. In the US, Carnegie Steel emerged in the late 19th century and really helped produce the steel that was necessary to create cities. They were the pioneers of urbanization. Carnegie Steel, a company, was driven by a purpose, urbanization, that was greater than profit. Or you look at Ford Motor Company, or in the early 20th century, emerging, and to really respond to the crisis that was in labor and among the poor. People weren't getting paid well, and Ford famously doubled the daily wage. And in an effort to really reflect the time, of course, the economic crisis of the early 20th century. And then you have Procter & Gamble and Colgate-Palmolive, who responded to the idea that there were stay-at-home moms at home needing entertainment, and they created the modern understanding of soap operas. These were not driven by revenue. These efforts were not driven by profit. These efforts were driven by the climate of the time, the cultural appetite of the time. And you look at through the history of the 20th century, you look at the great companies that came out in response to consumerism. They produced plastics, and then Tupperware is a great example of this. Companies that really responded to a greater moment in what people wanted. Fast forward to Google. You know, Google, of course, is a technology. Of course, it's an advertising platform. Of course, it's a search engine. But really, their effort to organize the world's information is a response to the glut that was produced by the internet. And then, of course, fast forward even more, the climate crisis we're in, we're seeing a new moment for new brands to step up and assert a certain dominance, a certain understanding, a certain intimacy with their purpose to exist in this environmentally tense time that we're in. And that's where Patagonia comes in. When it comes to corporate purpose, Patagonia is absolutely the poster child. I don't know how familiar you are with Patagonia, but everyone talks about Patagonia. Everyone's high about Patagonia, 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 the biggest certified B Corporation in the world. And they really have been the exemplar of what it means to be a purpose-driven company. We're obsessed with Patagonia. We talk about it all the time, and it has a lot to do with these bold moves that they make. You know, famously in the US, the day after Thanksgiving is a big consumer day called Black Friday. Patagonia famously said, don't buy this jacket on that day. And they donated all their profits to environmental causes. This is kind of insane. It's insane. It's insane to go so far as to say, don't buy the goods that you produce. And they really benefited from this. They benefit from this. They have 4% employee turnover, 100% retention among working moms, and they're hitting around $1 billion in revenue. You know, we love Patagonia. We love what Patagonia represents. But as a culture, as a business community, we are drunk on some purpose. We are high on some purpose. We are talking about purpose like crazy. You can look anywhere. Look at articles and books constantly written about purpose and the purpose evolution. Podcasts, you can't listen to a business podcast these days without someone talking about corporate purpose or selling purpose, do purpose, presentations and conferences, wall to wall, people constantly talking about, I'm doing it here now. You can search purpose on LinkedIn, and you'll see a couple million people have the word purpose in their title in LinkedIn. What? Purpose in your title on LinkedIn? Thousands and thousands of videos in TikTok and YouTube, 50,000 books on Amazon. I get paid really well to do this, traveling all over the place to talk about purpose. It's a bit of an obsession. But let me ask you another question here today, okay? So how many talks about purpose are happening on this stage during this conference? How many, you don't have to shout it out loud, but think about it. How many talks? There are 32 talks. How many would you guess are actually related to purpose? It turns out 7 of them have the title purpose, the word purpose in the title, and about half of them, of the 32, in some way relate to purpose. And here they are. I'm not the first person to talk about purpose. We're all talking about purpose. What does that mean? That the business community is reckoning with its conscience and what its role is, that we're constantly talking about purpose. Don't you find that interesting? That the whole industrial complex is obsessed with what purpose means. And we've seen some really powerful examples of that. Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, the largest asset manager in the world, famously a couple of years ago said that every company must not only deliver financial performance, but also show how it makes a positive contribution to society. There's an epiphany, there's an awakening on the part of companies to fill a void, perhaps created by government. And then this was furthered by the Business Roundtable, and of course, certified B corporations. My company, SYLVAIN, is a certified B corporation. There are about 3,500 in the world. And you look at tech companies, and here we are among like thousands of tech companies. You're seeing more and more tech companies asserting a sense of purpose. Roblox, the gaming company, their purpose has nothing to do with gaming. They're talking about bringing the world together through play. Or you look at Tesla, nothing to do with electric cars, to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. Or you look at Spotify, to unlock the potential of human creativity. Slack, to make work life simpler, more pleasant, and more productive. And then, of course, Robinhood. There's been a lot of attention on Robinhood these days to democratize finance for all. Don't you find it interesting that all these tech companies are sort of asserting an emotional reason to exist that's beyond the tech itself? And you might argue that all startups, what they need in their startup toolkit is a purpose. In addition to like a vest, and in addition to like a ping pong table in the office, and a charismatic founder and CEO, you need a purpose in that investor deck. You want to raise money. You need a reason to exist that's big. And it's almost like a trope. I argue that all this stuff is part of a tangled web that I call the purpose industrial complex, a network of strategic relationships and overlapping interests that allow companies, consultancies, celebrities, nonprofits, and governments to build appealing and profitable brands around noble aspirations. And there are tons of examples. You look at all these companies, the new companies that have emerged as new startups that have a foot in the world of purpose. And they all have a beautiful mix of celebrity endorsements and a nonprofit partnership, and it's really their way to provide a reason to exist in the mind of consumers. This is Slack's example again, to make work life simpler, more pleasant, and more productive. Allbirds, another great example of just, is it a product that you're buying, or is it a purpose that you're buying? And this is how I feel about it. I'm kind of like, what? That's a lot of talk about purpose. When George Floyd got killed in the US, all the companies came out and did a black square on Instagram on that day, Blackout Tuesday or whatever it was. It made you wonder, why weren't they prioritizing that before? Are they prioritizing it since? You think about the climate change movement and how so many companies are standing up for climate change, but in their own policies, sometimes they're hypocritical. Or you look at the companies that are posting rainbows everywhere, rainbow washing, while donating thousands to anti-gay politicians, companies like Walmart and companies like Wells Fargo. They'll have the rainbow on Instagram, but then they'll support a politician in Washington, D.C. that is actually voting against gender equality. 53% of consumers think brands trust wash or aren't as committed to helping society as they claim. Half of people are rolling their eyes. Half of people are doubting it. And when Nike sponsored Colin Kaepernick many years ago, that proved an amazing example of the power of purpose. But yet, even with that, only 60% of survey participants felt positively about Nike after viewing that ad. Only 60%. And of that 60%, only 45% thought Nike was genuinely committed to racial justice. It's a great case study people talk about, but does it really align with the reason they did it in the first place, or what the grand ambition is? I'm pretty cynical. as you can tell, but purpose still matters. Purpose still matters, and I'm going to go through a bunch of examples. So 94% of consumers believe the companies they engage with should have a strong purpose. When consumers think a brand has a strong purpose, they're 4 times as likely to purchase from that company. Consumers want it. 83% of consumers said companies should only earn a profit if they also deliver a positive impact. Companies perceived to have a strong purpose grew in value by 175%. 82% of people felt it was important for their companies, the companies they work for, to have a purpose. But I argue, and what I'm here today to talk about, is that purpose alone is not enough. That it's not enough to have a cute slide or a cute phrase or a cute thing that you just put on, on a wall. You need something more. And I argue that what companies need is a sense of obsession, a complete preoccupation with the reason you exist. It's not enough to write the line. What you need is a commitment to activating that line. Because the power of obsession is tremendous. The idea of obsession is tremendous. It activates, it triggers the amygdala in the brain, which is the emotional center of the brain, really gives you focus, gives you resiliency. And a lot of people look at obsession as like a negative thing. There are all obviously negative aspects to obsession. But actually, when you unlock an obsession about something, it actually makes you produce more. It actually makes you create better. And here's a quote from Psychology Today. Obsession, when made to serve us, can bring out our most capable selves, motivating us to find the creativity and ingenuity to solve incredibly difficult problems. There are great examples of the power of obsession. Michael Jordan, sick basketball player, but probably an obsessed and insane human being. It was his obsession, actually, that made him a tremendous competitor. We often talk about Steve Jobs and his ingenuity and his obsession with creativity, but it was actually the fact that he was a little crazy that made him, and a little obsessive that made him what he is today. Or even Jane Goodall, who's on the other spectrum, she completely committed her life to the study of chimpanzees. And 60 years studying that. And that, you might argue, is also an obsession. And when obsession is unlocked for an organization, when an obsession is unlocked and aligned with a purpose for an organization, incredible things can happen. I want to talk about NASA, which you might argue in the 50s and 60s was the ultimate startup. And when they committed to put a man on the moon, or a person on the moon, it was incredible what happened. They mobilized that. 400,000 people worked on putting a man on the moon. And the world and the US, it just captured the attention. People were just enraptured with the idea of that obsession. 93% of the American population watched that moon landing. And the astronauts came back and became rock stars. They became celebrities. They were on cover of magazines because there was an obsession with that purpose. And then that spawned a pop culture movement in that moment through 2001 Space Odyssey, even in music, even in film. And you fast forward to today, and if you're in Soho, where my office is, you see people rocking NASA as a fashion brand. Who would have thought NASA is a fashion brand? And that's all spawned from that moment in the 50s and 60s where NASA was at its best. And it all began with a simple purpose statement echoed by this ambitious president: we will put a man on the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. When he laid out that moonshot, it galvanized people, and it galvanized that obsession. And so I want to read one more quote. When you obsess, you learn how to extinguish distractions so that you can concentrate. You accept the hard existential fact that if you intend to matter, you must act as if you matter. You retrain your brain, asking it to halt its pursuit of fluff and worry to instead embrace its own potential. I'm going to read that quote one more time. But this time, listen to it as a company. Listen to it as a corporation. Imagine a corporation felt this. When you obsess, you learn how to extinguish distractions so that you can concentrate. You accept the hard existential fact that if you intend to matter, you must act as if you matter. You retrain your brain, asking it to halt its pursuit of fluff and worry to instead embrace its own potential. Imagine if companies had that. Imagine if companies had that sort of dedication. And that's why Patagonia is interesting. A lot of people say Patagonia is interesting because they're purpose-driven. It's not that they have a purpose. It's that they're driven. Forget the purpose, it's that they're driven. Yvon Chouinard, who founded the company so long ago, really believed in the wonder of the outside. His startup story is incredible. There was never a confusion around why they were there. And he stayed consistent with that from day one, everything they did, even imposing a tax on themselves to donate portions of their profits to environmental causes. They weaned themselves off of corporate cotton, only adopted organic cotton. And even going as so far in 2017 to do this putting tags in their own clothes to vote the assholes out, a response to the political climate of that moment. Yvon Chouinard is a hero. And we worked with Patagonia before, and if you're in the office on a certain day, on a certain time, and there's a swell, and there's like amazing surfing conditions, you're expected to go surf and not be in the office. And that's because of this obsession with the natural world. Purposeful brands aren't heroes. Purposeful brands are obsessed. So how do you systematize obsession for your organization? How do you take this and really put it to work? I argue that there are just 5 things. First, you need to really carefully define why you exist. It has to be a reason greater than revenue and profit. Second, you need to make sure it's aligned to every decision you make, hiring, incentives, supply chain. The purpose needs to be in the bones of the organization. You need to commit to it, make a pledge, make it clear, set a goal. And after you do that, recommit to it. Recommit to it, because it's not enough to do it one day. Sometimes people, they do their purpose, they close that deck, and they move on. But you need to revisit your purpose. It needs to be part of your DNA, part of your fabric, every day, every second. And then you have to measure it. You have to measure it and maybe even be transparent about where you sit relative to how you prioritize purpose. So for me, to make obsession work, like for real, to make obsession work and be consistent in your organization, it's 5 things. Definition, alignment, commitment, recommitment, and measurement. Purpose is easy. Consistency is what's hard. Purpose, it's easy to write the beautiful statement, but consistency is where the trap lies. My name is Alain. I'm the CEO of SYLVAIN. Please check us out. Thank you for your time.